Law of the World, a fictional adventure told in 100 episodes. Episode 38, The Witch and the Leprechaun. Liechtenstein is a peaceful place. Like their larger neighbor Switzerland, when the powers of the earth erupted into war for a second time in a generation, Liechtenstein remained neutral. So peaceful is Liechtenstein that in 1989 they officially outlawed the death penalty, despite the fact that no criminal had been executed in the country since February 26, 1785. Jennifer Dash and her bodyguard Ludwig huddled together in a closet. They were silent. Making any sort of squeak, rattle, hum, heavy breath might cost them their lives in this moment. Jenn couldn't believe it. It was happening. Robin, the lost boy of Liechtenstein, was right. He was dead right. And perhaps about to be just dead. Robin now was laying in the king-sized bed in the same room that Jenn and Ludwig hid. Jenn could see through the slats in the closet that he was shivering under the covers. It looked like he had his eyes closed, but surely he heard and felt her presence. The motel room was quite small. Quaint, one might say. To the right of the front door, as you entered, there was a bathroom just large enough for one to squeeze in and shower just beside the toilet. Besides that, there was just the one room with the large bed, which looked Alice in Wonderlandishly big when just tiny little Robin lay in it. Directly across from the bed was a small TV on a stand, and a 7-foot-tall closet, from the grooves of which Jenn and Ludwig now pervade the ghastly scene. After a long talk with Robin down in the sewers, after Ludwig popped above ground to get food for the threesome, a plan was hatched. As it turned out, Robin was a bright boy. If you could get him to calm down, he had quite the noggin above his neck. In the calm moments, if you could gain his trust, get him to slow down his breathing, which Jenn and Ludwig were remarkably successful at, then the youngling was even quite brave. This night's plan was all his initiative. Jenn couldn't doubt now, in this moment, the bravery it took to put himself in such harm's way. As I've already mentioned, the last state-operated execution in Liechtenstein was nearly 250 years ago, and it was of the infamous thief, Barbara Ernie. Ernie was a Hulk-like woman, as brawny as she was busty. Over the course of several years, Barbara Ernie, along with an unidentified accomplice, managed to pull off 17 successful heists in hotels across the Liechtensteinian region. When she was caught, the courts found Miss Ernie guilty of being the infamous Golden Booze. Her prize was death by beheading. No one in the town of Vaduz or the surrounding region had ever executed anyone, so the humble people called upon their blood-drenched neighbors to borrow an executioner. That was 1785. The executioner on that day cut Barbara Ernie's head off in front of over 1,000 entertained spectators. Yet, defying logic, here, now, creeping up on the supposedly sleeping Robin was the Golden Booze herself. Barbara Ernie resurrected, stood like a monolith above the quivering boy. Jenn and Ludwig knew what came next. Robin had coached them through it, told in scrutinizing detail how his first encounter with the golden booze went. Of course, there were no photos or realistic paintings of the original, historic Barbara Ernie. Liechtenstein did not see the mug of their infamous prisoner as something to be chronicled and remembered for all time. So then, quite naturally, neither Robin nor Ludwig nor Jenn or anyone else in the 21st century could identify this witching booze as the actual reincarnation of the original. Nevertheless, the similarities were stunning. Jenn, Ludwig, and Robin had only been waiting for 3 hours. That wasn't very long at all. This was quick. How on earth did this golden booze even know the lost boy was here? Earlier in the evening, Jenn returned to the fancy hotel she'd slept at the night before. This time, however, she registered along with her, quote, hubby, played sparklingly by Ludwig. The two held hands at the receptionist's desk to try to imprint that idea to any onlooker. In Ludwig's non-holding Jennifer Dash's hand, he carried a duffel bag. The idea was to make it look like a normal duffel bag of clothes and such, so they even bought some clothes to fill the top of the bag with, in case, for whatever reason, someone decided to inspect the bag. Below that top layer of clothes, however, little Robin was smuggled into the hotel. Robin believed that the golden booze and her leprechaun were out to kill him, hunting, specifically, him. He came to this conclusion after long days in the dark sewers. As it turned out, as the true story later unfolded, Robin had done a pretty fine job of putting the pieces of the puzzle together. He pretty much had it right. The only variable he missed was why exactly Robin's stepfather had called upon the golden booze to murder his wife and her son. You see, Robin, being a still young and impressionable little boy, couldn't get past the "he just doesn't like me" idea. Robin had assumed the mayor of Vaduz, his cruel stepfather, had simply wanted to get rid of Robin as well as his mother. He assumed the motivation was one of lovelessness. Daddy doesn't love me, that's why he hurts Mommy and me. Sadly, this was the logic imprinted onto Robin's psyche. The real motivation behind the mayor's actions, however, may prove to be more sadistic and cruel than that. Anyway, once inside the hotel room, Jenn, Ludwig, and Robin wasted no time. Robin ran to the bed while Jenn and Ludwig hunted for the perfect hiding spot. Waiting those hours in the closet, Jenn wondered what they would do if no golden booze showed herself. If they went the entire night with no sighting, the boy's theory certainly would not be disproven, not in the slightest. His father-in-law could still have contracted this menacing woman and her little friend to kill Robin, but no appearance would simply mean they didn't know the boy was above ground. Come to think of it, the logic of the whole operation tonight was hairy. If, as Robin intimated, the golden booze was magic, and magically could find him anywhere, then why was he somehow safe underground in the sewers? If the morning had come with no sighting, Jenn wouldn't know what to do next. It's quite possible that in the eyes of the law, she'd be considered a kidnapper. She'd be keeping a mysteriously vanished child not only from his rightful parent, but from an entire nation that was praying for his peaceful return. Those worries, however, vanished the instant Jenn heard the doorknob turn. Ludwig had locked the door hours ago. When Jenn first heard the slow jangle of the doorknob twist, she thought maybe someone had just come to the wrong room. They'd try their key, realize it didn't work, and move on to the right room. Not so. From their position behind the closet door, Jenn and Ludwig had no line of sight of the front door at all, or the golemic shadow that passed through it. When the frame of the golden booze came into Jen's view, she couldn't believe it. The woman was enormous, and yet her footsteps made no sound at all. The golden booze hung there in the room, standing maybe 7-8 feet tall. It seemed to Jenn that the monstrosity was just as wide as it was tall. Ludwig couldn't help it. He swallowed, trying to calm his nerves and mount his strength. His Everest stood hulking in front of his eyes. Ludwig was a big man, and big men aren't used to feeling dwarfed. Its back turned to the closet, Jenn and Ludwig had a keen view of the thing that crept out of the woman's backpack. To call it a backpack conjures up the wrong image. The woman had a mass of cloth, maybe sheepskin, dreidled over her back and strung up at the top. It resembled a grocery bag knotted at the top more than it did any modern backpack. Over this skin cloth pack, the golden boo's long hair overhang. One could say it was golden, yes, but it was a rusty gold, deep and reddish more than light and yellow. It hung to the center of the woman's back, and amidst the vivid golden strands were white and gray stalks, the resulting image of which was completely stupefying. From the back, this woman was ageless, or rather, ageful. She looked both young with her thick, long, deeply colored hair, but simultaneously old, as white and gray strands seeped through the picture as a whole. But the hair wasn't the problem. The problem was the thing that slowly spun out of that sheepskin. Robin had tried to prepare them for this. In the traditional story, the tale of Barbara Ernie and her thievery, the tale of the golden booze, the large-scaled woman carried a chest from hotel to hotel. She'd tell the lodge owner that all her worldly goods were kept in the box. She'd ask that the hotelier place the chest in a safe room. The owner would do so, and once inside the hotel's room of safekeepings, a little man would sprout out from the chest and steal everything he could get his hands on. Then the little man and Barbara Ernie would disappear into the night, hands full of whatever jewelry or treasure the other hotel guests had asked the owner to keep safe. It was a chest that the 18th century golden booze used to sneak her little thief in with. This 21st century iteration foregoed the chest in favor of this weird antique backpack. The creature that slithered out from the bag was just as Robin described him. Jenn understood instantly why it was the little one that Robin shouted out the name of in the dark sewers, rather than the golden booze herself. Looking at him now, Jenn suppressed the urge to shout out the same. He didn't wear a green three-piece suit as artists often depict leprechauns, but he did have a blossom of bright, laser-red hair atop his head. He climbed up out of the bag, making his way up towards the golden booze's shoulders. Through the slats in the closet door, Jenn could make out a demon's smile at the corner of this thing's mouth. A cold shiver ran down Jenn's veins. Robin's first encounter with the golden booze and her evil friend apparently began in this same way. Robin said he and his best friend, along with their father, were staying in a motel. Robin and his best friend Lukasz were in one bed and Lukasz's father in a twin bed just beside theirs. They had all fallen asleep after watching some late-night movies. Robin said he woke up when he first heard the door unlock. Robin, you see, had a terrorizing fear of hotels since his mother mysteriously died in one a year before. It was for this very reason that Lukasz's father came up with the plan of having a slumber party at a hotel. This to help get Robin over his fear, to help him see there was nothing evil in hotels, that no one was out to get him, that he wasn't fated to suffer the same mysterious end as his mother. Except, as it turned out, Robin had every reason under the sun to beware of hotels. Robin's worst nightmare had come to fruition. He woke up as the golden booze seemingly floated above the ground into the room. Robin watched, absolutely petrified, as the smiling leprechaun slithered out of the backpack. Robin managed to nudge Lukasz as the leprechaun took a seat above the golden booze. He was probably at least 3 feet tall, but on the golden booze, the leprechaun looked to be no bigger than a pinprick of blood. He wasn't small in the same way that little people or dwarves were. The leprechaun looked proportionally normal, just diminutive, like a child stunted by a gallon of coffee every morning. After Robin nudged him, Lukasz opened his eyes to catch the leprechaun thing leaping from the golden booze onto the bed. The leprechaun landed with precision, crouched over Lukasz's body, staring directly into the boy's eyes, and smiled, a wicked smile. Robin was too terrified to move. He knew somewhere in the back of his brain that what was happening was evil, and that not moving would only allow it to continue. But he was, as I've said already many times over, only a boy, and so phobia, great terror, ruled Robin to paralysis. The leprechaun brought his left hand to Lukasz's eyes. His fingers were horrifically overlong and pointed. It seemed he had the fingers of a witch, protruding and dangerous. The leprechaun used his fingers, twirled them slowly in front of Lukasz's eyes. A second later, the leprechaun leapt over to the other bed where Lukasz's father still slept. Lukasz himself was asleep. The fingers, they hypnotized Robin's friend. They levied instant sleep upon him. It was clear to Robin that the leprechaun was aiming to do the same to Lukasz's father, a hypnotized comatose. Why didn't the leprechaun hypnotize him? Because Robin was the golden booze's business. From her side, she pulled up a long stick, a skinny, shrimpy little stick. She snarled and pointed it at Robin. Gagging. She was asphyxiating him. Dying. Robin was dying. He managed to cry out while the leprechaun was still working on Lukasz's father. The cry awoke the man. Instinctively, he flung the little creature across the room. "Robin!" he cried. Golden Booze pivoted her attention. She moved her stick-pointing arm away from Robin towards the father. Robin didn't think. He didn't even bother to yet breathe. He ran out the motel room, sprinted down the hall, past the front door, into the dark, cold night. He found a storm drain that he could squeeze through. And there, in the underground sewers of Liechtenstein, Robin waited and abated his enemy. When Robin had retold this story to Jenn and Ludwig, he ended it by asking if Lukasz and his father were okay. Ludwig slowly, and with as much grace as one can possibly muster in such a sad situation, told Robin that Lukasz's father was found dead of spontaneous asphyxiation. The good news, however, was that Lukasz himself was okay. Lukasz had told none of these events to reporters or the police. It was only in the last 48 hours that the police had even connected Robin to Lukasz and his father. Lukasz had emphatically claimed to have no memory from that night. No memory of being at the hotel at all, or spending any time with Robin at all that evening. So, from this intel, the plan was hatched. Robin was convinced that the golden booze had come for him, that the horrible leprechaun was merely her henchman, putting to sleep the ones who weren't supposed to be there. And so, they made a plan to go down like this. Jenn and Ludwig would hide, wait for the golden booze and the leprechaun to come. When they did come, and the evil two saw the boy alone, they'd begin to choke him. That's when Ludwig would sack the big boo monster from behind. Jenn was to be in charge of the leprechaun. She'd pin him down somehow. Just be careful not to stare in his eyes or at his fingertips. If all this went to plan, they'd tie up the evil twosome with some rope Ludwig had just bought, and walk them over to the police station, telling the authorities everything that went down. Sure, the story would still sound ludicrous, but a tiny, slithery leprechaun and giant wand-pointing woman would help make the whole thing palatable. From there, they'd request asylum for Robin in the form of his moving in with his Aunt Lara in Zurich. At least until the fog cleared on the whole situation. It might not have been the best plan, but in the dark, damp of the sewers, it sounded reasonable enough. And at the end of the day, it really was Ludwig that made it all possible. If he'd had wanted to turn Robin in for a reward, neither Jenn nor Robin would be able to best him, especially while he donned the infrared night vision goggles. But as it played out, Ludwig was the biggest supporter of Robin's plan of all. He listened emphatically to the little boy's story, never once even hinting that he was skeptical. Jenn found this remarkable. After seeing fanny pack sporting hedgehogs and being healed by saliva from a beaked woman, Jenn had had enough interesting experiences to at least suspend judgment until further notice. But old Ludwig here, what experiences did he have to call upon that led him to be so emphatic and believing? Jenn didn't know. And Ludwig wasn't sharing. But now, with all skepticism thrown asunder by the sudden appearance of witch and leprechaun, all that was left of the plan was its practical application. The leprechaun now sat upon the golden booze, his long fingers resting atop her head.
Go, Ludwig, now.
Jenn whispered into Ludwig's ear. He was the one that had to make the first move. Jenn couldn't take down the behemoth on her own. She'd be asphyxiated before she laid a finger on the demon woman. Ludwig shook his head slightly. The leprechaun's clothes were peculiar. They looked more suited for Peter Pan than a figure from Irish myth, and he pulled out, from somewhere, Jenn couldn't see where, a mason jar. He uncapped it, pointed the open side towards the boy, and began to cackle. Jenn could see the terror in Robin's eyes. He trembled under the sheets. Jenn smelled that he lost control of his bladder. No one could blame him. Jenn couldn't imagine what it must be like to be at the receiving side of that hideous cackling above the behemoth gull. The witch raised her stick at Robin. It literally just looked like a busted-up old twig, not something magical the likes of which Harry Potter would boast about. No, this was wood encrusted with muddy earth. The golden booze shimmied closer to the boy, concealing him from Jenn and Ludwig's vision. But they didn't need to see Robin. They could hear him. He was choking to death. Ludwig, now! Jenn whispered. Ludwig didn't budge. Was he somehow hypnotized? Why wasn't he attacking? Ludwig! Jenn said too loud. The cackling leprechaun heard her. He stopped his cackling, slowly pivoted his scrawny body back towards the closet. The leprechaun stared at the closet. Jenn watched stunned as the little thing's eyes grew big. He saw them. Ludwig, now! Jenn yelled and pushed the lug nut out of the closet. Like a bowling ball powered by a locomotive, the beastly Liechtensteinian bum-rushed the wicked witch. The force slammed the witch to the ground. The leprechaun, impossibly spry, leapt off and landed on the bed, positioning himself not towards Ludwig, but Jenn. The stick wand had been flung out of the witch's hand. It hit the wall, and Jenn saw that Robin was breathing, though he appeared in hysterics. The boy wasn't in the clear yet. The trauma might still do him in. The witch and Ludwig tumbled on the ground. They were grappling, pushing limbs, scrapping to gain control and dominance of the other. The witch, much broader and bigger than Ludwig, caught his left leg in a vice between her two trunk legs. She brutally thrust herself against the direction of Ludwig's body, causing his knee to invert. Ludwig gasped in wretched pain. The brute of a man with his huge biceps brought his two arms together and pounded the booze in the chest as hard as he possibly could. The thud was loud. It sounded as though Ludwig broke her chest cavity open, but she made no howl, no complaint, and the two continued their deathly duel. Jenn didn't know what to do. She guessed that she had to contain the leprechaun, but how? She didn't know how to do it, so she just took a lesson from Ludwig and rushed towards the little man, to which he easily jumped over her.
No end! Get it!
The leprechaun said.
What?
Jenn said, astonished. What did the leprechaun want?
Get it!
There was no time to worry about intent. Jenn ran to the wall, grabbed the wand, and pointed it at the leprechaun.
Break it!
What? Jenn said. The witch, now sitting up, had a hand on each side of Ludwig's head. She pressed it hard. She was breaking his skull.
Break the wand! Break it!
Jenn took the little stick in both hands and snapped it. The witch's strength went out from her. Her hands fell to her side, her head drooped, and then her head rolled off onto the floor. Jenn stood stunned, not believing what she saw. The witch's head lay on the floor, detached mid-neck from the rest of its body. And then, just like that, the witch evaporated into a momentary mist. Ludwig looked up at Jenn, breathing painfully, unsure if the evil was over. "Open up in there! Open up now! The police are on their way!" Jenn looked to Robin and then to Ludwig. "Can you stand?" "Yes, but I can't walk on the leg." Jenn ran to Ludwig, helped him to his feet, grabbed Robin like a ragdoll and threw the boy onto Ludwig's back. She grabbed a lamp on the nightstand, threw it at the room's window. They were on the first floor, so exiting through the now busted window was easy enough. Jenn put her arm around Ludwig, and the three, together, hobbled out the window, headed back to safety, back to the sewers. Meanwhile, the leprechaun stood dumbly on the bed, staring at Jenn and her two new friends as they fled from the authorities for their lives. Whew, oh boy. I think we just broke a record for the most sound effects and music used in any one episode. If you're at all interested in looking up the music or sound effects we use, In this episode, or any other episode of Solve the World, we always post attribution to the artist and where we got the sound clip on our show notes page. So go ahead, look that up, and if there's a particular song that you like, give a shout out to the artist and thank them for, doing a good work and making it available under Creative Commons licenses. Guys, I want to thank you. The show's grown a lot in the last few weeks. Thank you for listening and keeping up with Jenn and her crazy adventures. Our goal, though, is to make this a sustainable engine. So I need your help. I need you to help me get more people listening. I said it before, I'll say it again. The number one way to do that is to write a review on iTunes. But if you don't like iTunes and you don't want to write a review on Stitcher or some other podcatcher, then just do it the old simple way. Tell a friend. Get someone else involved. I'd appreciate it. And as always, if you have any feedback for me, I love hearing from you guys. Thanks. Was it real? Did Jenn, Ludwig, and Robin really just encounter a witch armed with a true wand of potent power? Did her head really fall off from her body? Or was it some sort of mirage, a trick of the light? One note here, as the hotel manager knocked on the door, he of course did not yell in English, but rather in Swiss German. His words have been translated and retold today in English because in the moment, Jennifer would have understood his words no matter what language was shouted. The intent was clear to her, and so for your sakes, his words have been translated. Jenn now has to deal with a broken knee-capped Ludwig, a nearly magically strangled Lost Boy, and a stalking Leprechaun who doesn't think he's done with Jenn's tribe just yet. That's next time on Solve the World.